Welcome to episode 7 of Confessions of a Rock and Roll Cameraman, the podcast. I'm Pat Canavan here with my great friend, Tony Wannamaker.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, man.
Before we get started today talking about Chuck Berry, I just want to remind you to subscribe and like the podcast. If you're listening to CORNRC on audio, Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Samsung, Google, RSS, like us and subscribe and then share with your friends. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell button so that we can zing you some new episodes when they come up, and they will be coming up fast and furious. Also, go to our website, CORNRC.com, rockandrollcameraman.com, and subscribe there because we'll send you extra footage of Tony, and we'll also send you the medley of the 80s novelette.
A novelette?
A novelette.
A novelette.
And now, without further ado, from our sponsor, CORNRC.com, Chuck Berry and Tony getting to meet his hero, Chuck Berry, almost the king of rock and roll.
Well, I think you would argue the pioneer of rock and roll.
The pioneer of rock and
roll.
roll.
And we'll explain that reason why. We'll make that argument. But yeah.
Okay, so you're with Much Music.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure they're gung-ho for you going down to meet the pioneer of rock and roll. And I guess he's playing in Kitchener at Lulu.
Yeah, on the contrary, they weren't.
What are you talking about?
It was 1985, so we're celebrating the first year anniversary of the nation's music station, Much Music.
Okay.
So really, our Pandora's box at the time was Flock of Seagulls, Madonna, The Clash, we can go on down that line. But everybody who was trending in the 80s. And so if you were on the nostalgia circuit, which at that time Chuck Berry was doing, and rightly so, doing well at it, he with other artists like Brenda Lee and James Brown. So that's where I found him. He was on this nostalgia circuit, and he was going to go to Lulu's Roadhouse bar in Kitchener, Ontario.
That's amazing. So he's going to be playing in Kitchener. We're coming up to the first anniversary, and you're a big fan.
Huge fan.
What happens? You drive down?
I'm all excited. So I managed to sneak in on the Saturday when everybody's prepping, because I'd already done some work early in the week, done some pre-taping, what have you. So I had enough of an argument to posit to John Martin that I didn't need to be there. So before anybody really needed to check my background, realized that I was already gone. I was on the highway heading to Kitchener.
Wow,
late afternoon, brother. Yep.
Late afternoon on a Saturday to see Chuck Berry.
Excited to see that rock and roll icon, the guy who played the Red Gibson. I couldn't wait, man.
So you get there, you go to Lulu's. Now, Lulu's is kind of an iconic place too, isn't it?
Well, thank you, Pat. Yeah, they were known at one time as the biggest bar in the world. They actually won the Guinness World Book of Records. When you think about the size, the place was like 75,000 square feet. Ooh. So put that in scale, that's kind of like, let's say if I was an American, I'd say it's a White House and a half. And a Canadian, I'm going to say it's almost 2 acres.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Go Canada. Wow. Canada has the biggest bar.
Had
the biggest bar. So you get down, you park the Much Music truck. You're in a probably a Pathfinder or something. You park the vehicle. You go in and you get to see, Chuck Berry.
Well, it's a hot August night. I'm kind of sweating. It's a little bit humid. And man, I want to hit air conditioning. So quickly go into the former Kmart store. Right? And I get back in there. It looks industrial in the back, but they haven't refurbished that area. It feels like I'm in a Kmart store. And I'm sort of standing there idle, hoping that somebody will show up, because nobody knows I'm coming. I just decided I'm going to meet my rock star.
Okay.
That was the agenda. And lo and behold, man, in comes this guy in a boogie walk. And I was like stunned, because I was expecting the clouds to part, lightning to strike, maybe some smoke. It's kind of cool. But no, up walks Chuck Berry. Rock and roll icon hero.
Chuck Berry shows up. He doesn't have security around him. He doesn't have any of that.
Nope.
He's just in Kitchener.
Just a regular guy with a certain type of swagger and pompadored hair, man. So it's like, who is? I know who that is immediately, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what happens? You go up and say, hey.
It turned out to be a terrible event, man. And this is that kind of notion. Be careful what you wish for. Because I had probably most of my life waited to meet the guy who was, responsible with Johnny Be Good and Sweet Little 16. I can go on, Maybelline. And he was a dick.
What do
He
you
was
mean?
an asshole. Man, no, it wasn't good at all. I presented myself, and as a dutiful, easy for me to say, Much Music employee, I explained our process of reciprocity. Basically, back then, we did something like this, Pat, and you as a musician know this. I come in, I film a couple minutes of your performance, maybe, and I would love it, get an interview, a clip or two, explaining what you're doing at Lulu's,
Well,
right?
sure.
I take it back, and we play that. Well, it's not played, it's played to the nation. It goes to all of Canada. We're on Sky Network at the time, so it goes to all of Europe, right? And we penetrate the US, there's no question. And so that being said, your exposure is huge. That's why you do promotion. But he would have none of this, and he was really mean to me, man.
What happened?
Well, he kept waving this goddamn chicken leg in front of me, right? And it was really getting annoying seeing this little pecker coming around my nose all the time. And I explained to him, hey, man, we don't pay, but this is how we can work it out. It's kind of fair, right? It's everybody gets something. He just told me, hey, I don't want you shooting my fucking show, and you can leave. And I was like, wow, we're crossing so many lines here. And I lost my mind.
Wait a minute. Can
Yeah.
I just... He came up to you with a chicken leg.
A chicken leg, just like that.
And
he
he's
was just waving it to the nose, just waving. And I kept thinking, if you hit me with that chicken in the nose, you're a dead man.
What the... Well, he's kind of the king of rock and roll.
Well, king of rock and roll, but did you know he punched Keith Richards right in the face, man? Yeah.
I'm shocked because...
Yeah, back in the day, they were making a documentary about Chuck Berry called Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll, directed by Hackford Taylor.
Okay.
And in it had celebrities like Eric Clapton, Keith Richards. Don't forget, all of these bands love Chuck Berry, the pioneer.
Well, sure.
I mean, you look at George Harrison's affinity for him. Paul McCartney called him the poet laureate. John Lennon went on to say that if there wasn't the word rock and roll, it would have been Chuck Berry.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So but he was an ass. And it was interesting because he has issues, I think, a lot about getting ripped off. And this harkens back to the beginning of rock and roll when there was notorious contracts that ripped off people like Bo Diddley, James Brown. Chuck Berry later found out what it's like to hire legal counsel and take care of these problems, and you can correct a terrible contract. And he did that. But I think some of that angst, Pat, hung over because he was really rude, really mean to me. And I'll be honest, it wasn't professional. I reached the inflection point. I'm only human. I turned around and said, Chuck, I don't want to shoot your fucking show, and I'm leaving. And I went to exit, Pat, no word of a lie. I went to exit, and this big old arm comes around me. And big hug, and he goes, hey, man, you're all right. You can stay, and you can shoot my show. Wow. And I was like, what? He's like, did I just meet a sociopath? How do you switch that fast? And that being said, he said, come on down, I'm going to buy you dinner. And you know what we were going to have? Chicken.
Well,
fried chicken. Lots of that chicken.
You got to wonder when a guy comes...
KFC, man.
You got to wonder when a guy comes at you with a drumstick.
Well, that's what I said. I said, and I won't use another expletive, but I said, beep, beep. Get a bucket.
So that's amazing. So now he's your adversary, and now he's your buddy.
We are pen pals, BFFs, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you go in, and hey, free chicken is free chicken, I guess. Yeah. And he's got a bucket of the Colonels.
Well, it's a bucket of joy when I get back there, and I want to leave the crescendo for a second because it's pretty cool what happened in the green room, but. When I mentioned the pioneer and all of these great global superstars love Chuck Berry because It's argued, Pat, that he's the one who started rock and roll.
Right.
Because he referred to it as that hillbilly music, which we know was really a sort of a white colloquial term for the African-American South music, which we kind of knew more as Americana, right? Okay. And that's mixing in. Everybody argues that Chuck was inspired by the blues. Well, that's not really true. Yes, he's from Missouri. right? But he was mostly influenced by Western music at the time, right? So he grew up listening to that. And one of the songs he listened to, he really loved, was called Ida Red. Now, Ida Red's an old Americana folk song. It came around in the mid-30s, right? It was a really popular song. And he reappropriated that song and played it for a guy named Leonard Chess. Leonard Chess, by the way, became famous. Chess Records, one of the early recording, a lot like Sun Records, Sam Phillips and his connection with Elvis Presley. So we have these two things happening, or Berry Gordy and Motown Records happening at the same time for urban music. So you have this happening with Chuck Berry, and he records this song. And it's wild. And he recorded Maybelline. And I argue, some people say it was a song that involved Ike Turner. Remember Ike and Tina Turner, right?
Yeah.
It involved Ike Turner a couple of years earlier. And that, pardon me, was called Rocket 88, which is a song about V8 cars, man. Big block engines, Pat. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Chuck Berry took it a step further, Pat. He recognized youth culture. He recognized post-war industrialism, right? And he wrote about it. And that's why McCartney refers to him as a poet, because who the hell else was writing in their lyrics, roll over Beethoven, tell Tchaikovsky the news? Who even knew who these people were?
Right.
These are classic, right, composers. And he cited them. Amazing. And so it was interesting. In 2001, the Rolling Stone magazine cited this about Chuck Berry, and it kind of really evokes a lot what we're talking about. And that is, he said, quote, I conceptualized on this fun and frolic, the post-war novelties. I wrote about cars because half the people had cars or wanted them. I wrote about love because everybody wants that. And says, I wrote songs that white people could buy. That was my goal, to look at my bank book and see $1 million there. So Chuck had no adversity to avarice. He was into making money, and he states that from the very get-go. But he grew up in a middle-class family, Pat, so he didn't have the blues that you might find from a Muddy Waters type talking about poverty and being an African-American growing up in the South.
Sure.
The Jim Crow South, man. Now, for those of you who don't know Jim Crow, that was a term used basically about segregation, that people don't want people getting uppity. And it was a terrible time, but these laws managed to oppress people, okay? So James Brown was really affected by that. And he was impoverished and grew up with that, and being an African-American in the South was...
Yeah, because that's very interesting, because they were both born and raised at around the same time,
Yep.
and they both had a huge effect on the American culture.
That's right.
But I guess the roots, their roots, their experiences.
Experiences, absolutely. And you'll appreciate this as a musician, whereas James Brown would look at the blues because he's singing about the blues.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas Chuck Berry, the blues was and you'll appreciate it, is 12-note progression. It was a different type of interpretation of the blues.
Yeah. And Chuck Berry was again, like you were saying, how can I sell this stuff?
Yeah. And so when he recorded Maybelline, they changed the title. You'll love it, from Ida Red to Maybelline, because Leonard looked in the studio and went, "Oh, there's a cosmetic box, and guess what's marked on it? Maybelline." Made sense. But more importantly, what Chuck did in that song is he imbued two notions. One was the big car, right?
Yeah.
Post-war, and the other one was the fact that his girl done him wrong. She's taken off ahead of him in a Coupe de Ville. So he's playing on this idea of again, the youth culture, right? And they're all seeking joy and seeking one another's attention.
Well, that's amazing, because that's almost the genesis of pop culture right there.
Yeah.
Where you take the ingredients of the time,
Oh, Pat.
put them all together, and come out with a song that everybody wants to ingest.
Thank you for that point. In 1986, Chuck Berry was indoctrinated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, okay? So here he is getting his induction into Ohio, right? And he's pretty excited about it. But what's fascinating is that they managed to summarize his notion, his impact on rock and roll. And this is what they said, quote, "While no individual can be said to have invented rock and roll, Chuck Berry comes closest to any single figure to being the one who put all the essential pieces together." So what do they mean by that?
Oh, yeah.
So at the time he recorded it with a guy named Muddy Waters and Willie Dixon. Okay? Willie Dixon is famous, right?
Yeah.
For his background in the Chicago blues, okay? And that's where Leonard Chess had the recording studio, so he draws him in there to do a recording session. And it was fascinating because, again, the crossroads, James Burke. 3 months earlier, I was in Kingston, Jamaica, and that's where I met Willie Dixon. Right? He was with Dizzy Gillespie, you know, like horn player with the big cheeks. Yeah. Beautiful. And I was there for the International Youth Festival at the time. So it's just a wonderful connection to know that at the embryonic stage of rock and roll music, I'm meeting a lot of the people who were instrumental in constructing the architects of rock and roll music.
So in 85, you meet Chuck Berry in Kitchener.
Yes.
Then you meet Dizzy Gillespie in Kingston.
Yeah, prior. Yeah.
Prior to that.
Yeah.
Wow, serendipity.
It's total serendipity, right?
Crazy.
Again, a crossroads. Right?
So let's bring it back to Lulu's. Let's go back. All right, so you're there. You've just had a brawl with the
potential. It would have been ugly. I can't believe that happened, but it did.
So you just had a fight with an almost fight with your hero. And then he invites you in for chicken, and then you go into the green room. What happens?
It was amazing. At the time, he was married to Thametta Suggs, right? And that was his lifelong wife, and that took them right up to 2017 when we lost Chuck Berry at the age of 90.
Right.
But back then, I was surprised when he introduced me to his flame of the night, which was a lovely Caucasian woman. Who lived in that area. And I'm assuming, because I kept probing to try and find out, because, wow, this is quite the enigma, her origins. And apparently while he was on tour in the 60s, he hooked up with her. So what was fascinating, Pat, there was a lot of young people there, a lot of young North American kids jumping up and down, calling out Uncle Chuck. But they were all white. It was wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I was like, okay. Anyways, I didn't have any chicken. I did have some of the chocolate cake. That was pretty good. But that being said, while that was happening, while I'm consuming my chocolate cake, I see some ruckus happening, and I inquire. So I stick my nose in that business, and sure enough, this is one of the great riders. And Pat, you know, most musicians on the road all have riders. It's to make sure, first of all, they got, you know, food and drink, but really it's for lawyers. Lawyers want to check that you're adhering to the contract. And if you don't have certain points in that contract, you're technically in breach and they can sue you for it. Chuck Berry took advantage of this.
Okay. How?
Okay. First of all, he's got to get paid $20,000 US cash before he walks on stage.
Ooh.
And I saw it looked like a brick of dollars, man. It was really neat to see.
No, come on.
Yeah.
Come on, no.
So I saw the guy just rolling out and counting, and they were counting it off.
What? They didn't go to his agent or his manager?
Straight in his hand. Old school.
Holy
right there. Counting the money out. $20,000. And then when he leaves the stage later that night, they got to give him another $5,000. Just to temper it. Right?
Oh, okay. So $20,000 up front, and then $5,000 on the way out if he finishes his show, probably.
Yep.
So what's the rider for?
Well, as I said, the rider for him is to make extra money. This is one interesting aspect of his rider. In Chuck Berry's rider, he says, I have to have, for the performance, 2 unaltered Fender dual Showman reverb amplifiers. I have no idea what that means. But what I did find out, that if you're lucky, you might find this piece of equipment at the Smithsonian Institution. So kind of hard to find. Why? Because if you don't have these speakers, you owe him an extra $500 penalty.
$500.
Right? So you pay him, and everybody pays the $500. Who has it, right?
Covers the cab ride home for the extra wife and kids.
Right? I love it.
Or maybe kids.
Oh.
Wow.
And the other thing he stipulated was he tours on the road. So he doesn't go with a band, he goes by himself, right? And he has his trunks, like circus trunks, full of clothes, right? And again, weird crossroads. 15 years later, I meet him, right, in Brampton, Ontario. And this is now he's wearing the sailor's cap, right? It's really cool. It actually looks good on him, right? Little sailor cap. Okay. I don't know how much sailing he does, but he's got a nice sailor's cap. And what was amazing is that it was supposed to be an outdoor concert, but I think it was a flea market, Pat. Anyways, there was 7 people around the stage. There's a little trailer. He did his thing, and I thought, it's fascinating, right? And I wonder if they had the same rider, right? But I guess that didn't pan out. So here we are, and the same thing happened then, which happened way back at Lulu's, and that is, all the musicians have to know every one of his songs, because he has no set list, man. No set list.
So the drummer, the bassist, the guitarist don't travel with him.
Nope.
He just shows up and...
Yeah, because that's a lot cheaper, right? And they all have to know. And the interesting thing was, and I felt it's kind of sad, when I went out to the pit area, which is the area just in front of the stage, and I get down in, I can shoot up. That's the pit. And when I'm shooting the pit area, I was watching, and in the first song, Pat, Chuck Berry fired the saxophone player. He kind of looked over and went, "Go, you're gone," right? And the other band members are looking pretty skittish and a little nervous, and they're playing away like, "What the hell's going on?" Right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but he did make a stipulation that I could only film 3 of his songs.
All right.
Yeah. So I filmed, as you say, you heard the first song, second song, no problem. The third song, unbelievably, 3,000 people in the audience. He shuts it down cold, man. Just stops, right? Just heaving in sweat, perspiration, just drenched.
And you're filming him.
Yep. And I'm at the front of stage, front of house, and he just walks over, bends over, right? I just got showered by the sweat on him, right? And he stops, he goes, "Tony, I think that's enough. You can go now." So I said, "All right, thank you, Chuck," in front of 3,000 people, right? And I turned around and made my merry way back to Toronto.
And that's it.
That's it. Yep.
So you got 3 songs. He comes in, shuts you down, out you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he still stopped. He still shut down the sign. This is hilarious. I don't know why. I ripped this off a piece of cardboard that was in the back. Maybe it was holding Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't know.
Yeah.
And anyways, he signed it for me, unbelievably. So yeah, Chuck Berry. And he look at that. See that in the end?
Yeah.
Happy face.
Happy face.
It wasn't a sad day. It was a happy day. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Huh.
So yeah, so there it was. I had a chance to meet the pioneer rock and roll. And I say to my good friends, be careful what you wish for. Surprise.
Yeah. And he's not always the, like other people we've talked about, Johnny Cash and whatnot, who are very kind and giving you of your time. He was almost like, "I don't want your time."
He didn't want to know me. I represented media, the evildoer.
Yeah.
I was there to steal souls. There's no question. And the fact that I wasn't paying, wow, that must have been a major red light for him. I'm sure that set him off, right? But I don't think so, because every other account, and in my book, I do cite some things that are really unfavorable. They're not great, but these are truths, and they have been validated and documented. And there's an aspect of his character that isn't so welcoming, isn't so warming.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, he's a human.
Well, sometimes you can be an arrogant human, or you can be a good human.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
and with that beautiful note, I want to say thanks to the CORNRC community, the Confessions of a Rock and Roll Cameraman podcast community, for tuning in and hearing these great stories from Tony.
Thank you, Pat. Awesome, man.
Where else are you going to get these diverse stories in every episode? So thanks for tuning in. If I haven't said already, subscribe, and we'll send you out free stuff. We'll put you in a contest to give you more free stuff. Like that. An autographed picture of Tony with an autographed picture of Chuck Berry. All right. Again.
I won't hit you. I won't poke a chicken bone in your face, and I won't provoke you.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.